In the bustling heart of Crescent City, where the air hung heavy with the scent of jasmine and the distant echo of jazz, resided Dr. Elias Thorne. His name, synonymous with trust and precision, was whispered with reverence in the hallowed halls of Bayou University Medical School, where he lectured on the intricate mysteries of the female reproductive system. At 45, Elias was more than just an obstetrician gynecologist. He was, in the eyes of countless women, a guardian of womanhood itself. He had ushered over 1,000 new lives into the world, navigated countless pregnancies with a steady hand, and delivered diagnoses with a quiet, unwavering confidence. His life, meticulously ordered and professionally flawless, revolved around the very essence of female existence, yet a profound emptiness lingered within his own. 5 years prior, the vibrant tapestry of his personal life had unraveled with the insidious spread of a rare illness that claimed his beloved wife. Since then, Elias had retreated into the comforting, demanding embrace of his work, a fortress built against the tide of grief. Friends, sensing the quiet void, attempted to coax him back into the social currents, urging him to find companionship, a gentle hand to pull him from the depths of his solitary existence. His daughter, Clara, a fiercely intelligent and observant 19-year-old, pleaded with him to embrace life beyond the sterile confines of the operating room, to seek out a partner before the years rendered him a mere shadow of his former self. He would offer a polite laugh, a dismissive shake of his head, believing that love, in its purest, most vibrant form, was a privilege reserved for his patients, a concept alien to his own reclusive heart. But fate, in its unpredictable cruelty, had other plans. It was at a lavish charity gala hosted in the opulent ballroom of the Grand Magnolia Hotel that Serena Vance, a woman draped in a crimson satin gown that seemed to breathe with her every movement, glided into his meticulously constructed world. Her voice, a soft, hypnotic whisper, carried a subtle allure. Her eyes, sharp and knowing behind thick dark lashes, seemed to peer directly into the core of his guarded being. She introduced herself as an artist and event coordinator, a delicate blend of creativity and organized chaos. Serena possessed an uncanny ability to listen, truly listen, absorbing his every word, his every unspoken thought, and, more profoundly, she possessed the rare gift of making a man feel undeniably seen. For the first time in years, Elias felt a crack in his carefully constructed armor. The white coat, the prestigious doctor title, the unspoken label of the mourning widower, all seemed to dissolve under the warmth of her gaze. They spoke for hours amidst the clinking of champagne flutes and the murmur of polite conversation, their voices weaving a private symphony in the grand hall. She laughed at his dry academic humor, a genuine, unforced sound that resonated deep within him. He, in turn, found himself captivated by her stories, her vibrant descriptions of distant lands and artistic endeavors, a stark contrast to the rigid parameters of his own life. Their courtship was a whirlwind of luxurious dinners, quiet evenings spent discussing art and literature, and spontaneous weekend getaways to secluded coastal towns. Elias, usually reserved and methodical, found himself swept away by Serena's spontaneity, her effortless charm. He was drawn to her enigmatic quality, the tantalizing hints of a mysterious past that she deftly sidestepped with a captivating smile. He proposed to her not in a traditional setting, but in a small, intimate art gallery, a place that resonated with Serena's artistic soul, a testament to the new, passionate life he envisioned with her. She accepted with tears in her eyes, a silent promise of a future filled with color and light. Yet, from the very beginning, a discordant note echoed through their burgeoning symphony. Clara, Elias's daughter, possessed an unnerving intuition, a keen ability to pierce through superficial appearances. From the moment she met Serena, a quiet alarm bell chimed within her. Serena, with her perfectly crafted stories and her elusive past, felt off. Clara, a budding cybersecurity student, began to subtly scrutinize Serena's social media presence, noting the glaring absence of family photos, the inconsistent narratives about her upbringing. A chilling memory surfaced, a heated argument Clara had inadvertently overheard between Serena and an unknown man, a tense exchange whispered in hushed, angry tones. Further adding to the disquiet, Sarah, Elias's trusted surgical nurse and confidant, raised concerns about Serena's inconsistent stories regarding her profession. Sarah, who had known Elias for years, observed Serena's vague answers, her tendency to deflect when questioned about her specific responsibilities as an artist and event coordinator. Elias, too, began to feel the gnawing unease. Serena's evasion of questions about her past, particularly when it came to mundane details like her birth certificate or previous addresses, became increasingly noticeable. She spoke of a house fire that had claimed her birth certificate, a flood that had washed away her old identification, explanations that felt too convenient, too polished. She even claimed to be in the process of replacing an old driver's license, a detail that struck Elias as oddly prolonged. The unease escalated when Elias, in a moment of financial prudence, presented Serena with a prenuptial agreement. He, a man of considerable wealth accumulated through years of diligent practice, believed it was a sensible step, a safeguard for his assets and Clara's inheritance. Serena, however, reacted with an unexpected, almost visceral intensity. Her refusal to be named as a primary beneficiary, her insistent demand for a significant lump sum settlement in the event of a divorce, sent a shiver down Elias's spine. It felt incongruous with the passionate, selfless woman he believed he had fallen in love with. The whispers of doubt, initially faint, began to grow louder, weaving a chilling overture to a tragedy Elias could never have foreseen. He was a guardian of womanhood, a man who had built his life on certainty and scientific fact. But what happens when the very foundation of your reality is built on a lie? What happens when the person you trust most harbors a secret so profound it threatens to shatter your very identity? The stage was set, the curtain slowly rising on a story of love, deception, and a shocking revelation that would forever alter the course of Dr. Elias Thorne's life. The emptiness that had long plagued Dr. Elias Thorne's meticulously ordered life, a void created by the loss of his wife 5 years prior, was not merely a passive absence, it was an active, consuming silence. His grand home in Crescent City, once filled with the warmth of shared laughter and the comforting rhythm of family life, now echoed with a profound stillness. Each evening, as he shed the sterile white coat of his profession, he would retreat into a solitude that, while initially a balm for his grief, had slowly begun to calcify into a cold, unyielding shell. His days were a precise ballet of surgeries, consultations, and lectures at Bayou University Medical School, each movement choreographed to perfection, each interaction professionally flawless. Yet, beneath the veneer of professional competence lay a man adrift, anchored only by the demanding currents of his career. Friends, concerned by his increasing reclusiveness, attempted a gentle intervention. They would extend invitations to social gatherings, suggest blind dates, or simply offer a sympathetic ear over a shared meal. "Elias, you can't live like this forever," they would urge, their voices laced with a mixture of compassion and exasperation. "You need to find someone, a companion." He would offer a polite smile, a non-committal shrug, deflecting their well-intentioned efforts with the practiced ease of a man who had mastered the art of polite evasion. To him, the concept of a new romantic connection felt not just distant, but almost sacrilegious, a betrayal of the love he still held for his late wife. He believed that the vibrant, messy, beautiful chaos of love was a privilege reserved for his patients, those new families he helped bring into being, a sentiment he felt entirely unworthy of experiencing himself. His daughter, Clara, however, was not so easily dissuaded. At 19, she possessed a fierce, almost preternatural intuition, a deep understanding of her father's emotional landscape. She saw beyond the composed facade, recognizing the quiet ache that resonated within him. "Dad, you deserve to be happy," she would insist, her voice earnest, her gaze unwavering. "You can't just work yourself into an early grave. Find someone before you become a fossil." Her words, though delivered with a touch of youthful exasperation, stemmed from a profound love and a desperate desire to see him reclaim a measure of joy. But Elias, trapped in the amber of his grief, remained stubbornly resistant, convinced that his lot was to live out his days in quiet, dignified solitude. Then, at a glittering charity gala held within the resplendent ballroom of the Grand Magnolia Hotel, a woman materialized from the crowd, a vibrant splash of crimson against the muted backdrop of formal wear. Her name was Serena Vance, and she moved with a grace that seemed both deliberate and entirely effortless. She was not merely dressed in a crimson satin gown, she seemed to wear it, as if the fabric itself was an extension of her enigmatic allure. Her voice, a low, melodic whisper, carried a subtle cadence that drew him in, a magnetic pull he found herself powerless to resist. Her eyes, sharp and knowing behind thick, dark lashes, possessed an uncanny ability to peer directly into the guarded core of his being, to see the man beneath the prestigious title. Serena introduced herself as an artist and event coordinator, a captivating blend of creativity and meticulous organization. She spoke of her work with a quiet passion, her words painting vivid pictures of canvases brought to life and seamless events orchestrated with an unseen hand. From the moment they spoke, Elias felt an unfamiliar lightness, a crack in the carefully constructed armor he had worn for so long. The sterile white coat, the esteemed title of doctor, the unspoken label of the mourning widower, all seemed to dissipate under the warmth of her gaze, her genuine interest. They conversed for what felt like hours, even as the clinking of champagne flutes and the polite murmur of other guests faded into a distant hum. Their voices wove a private symphony in the grand hall, a duet of discovery. She laughed at his dry, academic humor, a genuine, unforced sound that resonated deep within him, a melody he hadn't realized he missed. He, in turn, found himself utterly captivated by her stories, her vibrant descriptions of distant lands, artistic endeavors, and philosophical musings, a stark and refreshing contrast to the rigid parameters of his own life, which often felt confined to the predictable rhythms of the hospital. Their courtship unfolded rapidly, a whirlwind of opulent dinners at exclusive restaurants, quiet evenings spent in Elias's study discussing art and literature, and spontaneous weekend getaways to secluded coastal towns along the Gulf Coast. Elias, typically reserved and methodical in every aspect of his life, found himself swept away by Serena's spontaneity, her effortless charm, her ability to make every moment feel infused with a thrilling, unexpected joy. He was drawn to her enigmatic quality, the tantalizing hints of a mysterious past that she deftly sidestepped with a captivating smile and a quick change of subject. It was a dance of attraction and gentle evasion, a game he found himself surprisingly willing to play. He chose to believe her explanations, to trust the charming woman who had brought so much light back into his shadowed world. He ignored the subtle red flags, the fleeting moments of unease, chalking them up to his own inexperience with dating after so many years of widowhood. The culmination of their whirlwind romance came in a small, intimate art gallery, a space brimming with vibrant colors and bold expressions, a place that resonated deeply with Serena's artistic soul. It was there that Elias, on one knee, offered her his heart and his future. He wasn't one for grand gestures, but this felt right, a testament to the new, passionate life he envisioned with her. She accepted with tears glistening in her eyes, a silent promise of a future filled with vibrant hues and unspoken desires. Elias, gazing into her tear-filled eyes, felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet conviction that he had at last found his true companion, the woman who would fill the void that had lingered for so long. He was convinced she was the one who could heal his wounded heart, a belief that blinded him to the subtle, unsettling truths that lay just beneath the surface. The air in the luxurious hotel suite on Isla Bonita thickened, charged with a terrifying energy. Elias Thorne, his face a mask of barely contained fury, stood over Serena, who lay trembling on the bed, her abdominal pain now overshadowed by a primal fear. The clinical detachment that usually governed his actions had evaporated, replaced by a searing, visceral rage. He held up the wallet, the ID card of Leo Javier Vargas, a stark, undeniable testament to her deception. His voice, usually calm and measured, was a low, guttural growl, barely recognizable even to himself. "Who are you?" he demanded, the words laced with a venom he hadn't known he possessed. "What is this? What have you done?" Serena's eyes, once so captivating, darted between his face and the incriminating ID. Her composure, usually so impenetrable, fractured. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her pale cheek. She tried to sit up, her hands clasped in a gesture of supplication. "Elias, please," she whispered, her voice a fragile tremor. "Let me explain. I can explain everything." But Elias was beyond explanation. His mind reeled, a maelstrom of shattered trust and profound humiliation. He, Dr. Elias Thorne, the highly respected OB-GYN, a man who built his entire professional life around the truth of female biology, had been utterly, completely duped. The thought gnawed at him, a festering wound on his meticulously crafted identity. "Explain?" he scoffed, the word dripping with contempt. "There's nothing to explain. You lied to me. You lied about everything. Who are you, really?" Serena, seeing the impenetrable wall of his rage, finally broke. Her voice, choked with sobs, began to unravel the truth, a confession born of desperation and the crushing weight of exposure. She admitted her journey, her transition nearly a decade prior, the full gender affirmation surgeries, the lifelong commitment to hormone therapy, the painstaking process of changing every legal document, every shred of her identity. She spoke of the pervasive fear that had haunted her for years, the constant terror of judgment, of rejection, of violence, should her past ever be revealed. She recounted the countless times she had almost told him, the words catching in her throat, paralyzed by the fear that he would leave her, that her carefully constructed world would crumble around her. "I loved you, Elias," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I truly loved you. I was so afraid I'd lose you if you knew. I just wanted to be loved for who I am now." Her words, intended as a plea for understanding, ignited a fresh wave of fury in Elias. Love? What did she know of love? To him, her confession wasn't an act of vulnerability. It was a further confirmation of the depth of her deceit, a twisted justification for years of lies. His mind latched on to the phrase, "who I am now," recoiling from it. His understanding of womanhood, the very bedrock of his professional and personal identity, felt utterly demolished. It wasn't just that she was transgender. It was that she had actively concealed it, building their entire relationship on a falsehood. He felt violated, as if his very definition of reality had been desecrated. The idea that he, a man who prided himself on his discerning intellect, had been so utterly blind, so completely taken in, fueled a burning sense of shame that quickly morphed into a terrifying, uncontrollable wrath. "You took everything," he roared, his voice echoing off the walls of the luxurious suite. He lunged forward, his hands, usually so precise and gentle in the operating room, now contorted into instruments of destruction. Serena recoiled, her face contorted in a mixture of terror and resignation. She had feared this moment, this violent unraveling, for years. She had built her life on a precarious balance of secrecy and hope. And now that balance had been irrevocably shattered. Elias's fingers, powerful and unyielding, closed around her throat. The struggle was brief, desperate. Serena gasped, her hands flailing weakly, clawing at his arms, trying to dislodge his grip. Her eyes, wide with panic, locked with his, searching for a flicker of recognition, a sign of the man she had loved. But Elias's eyes were cold, distant, consumed by a primal rage that had eclipsed all reason, all compassion. The years of professional discipline, the oath to do no harm, dissolved in the inferno of his humiliation. He saw not Serena Vance, the woman he had married, but the embodiment of the lie that had consumed his life. He pushed down, the pressure increasing, the air slowly, agonizingly cut off. Serena's struggles grew weaker, her body convulsing once, then going limp. The last breath escaped her lips, a final, silent whisper of despair. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Elias's ragged breaths and the frantic pounding of his own heart. The rage, having reached its crescendo, slowly began to recede, leaving behind a chilling void. He released his grip, his hands trembling as he stared at the lifeless body of the woman he had just murdered. The crimson satin gown, once a symbol of her allure, now seemed to mock him, a stark contrast to the pale, still form beneath. Then, the cold, calculating part of his mind, the part that had guided him through complex medical procedures, began to work. Panic, raw and corrosive, threatened to overwhelm him, but his training, his need for control kicked in. He had to make it look like an accident. He had to erase all traces of his monstrous act. His eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that could support a fabricated narrative. The empty prescription bottle on the nightstand, the half-eaten meal from room service, the scattered clothes. He would use them, manipulate them, twist the scene to tell a different story. He meticulously moved her body, trying to position it as if she had fallen, perhaps in a drunken stupor. He rearranged items, wiped surfaces, his hands working with a terrifying precision, each movement a desperate attempt to outrun the horrific truth of what he had done. But the truth, once unleashed, has a way of finding its own path, no matter how desperately one tries to bury it. And in the quiet, still room, the chilling reality of his act hung heavy in the air, an indelible stain on his soul. The unsettling rhythm of doubt, once a faint background hum, now beat a relentless tattoo against the walls of Elias Thorne's carefully constructed world. It was a mundane act, one he had performed countless times in his life, that would ultimately shatter the illusion. Serena, in her charming haste, had left her carry-on bag slightly ajar. Elias, with the innocent intention of ensuring it was properly closed before their upcoming honeymoon, reached for it. His fingers brushed against something hard and unyielding within a side pocket. Curiosity, a dangerous ally to burgeoning suspicion, compelled him to investigate. He pulled out a wallet, its leather worn smooth, not the sleek feminine accessory Serena usually carried. Inside, nestled amongst credit cards and a scattering of foreign currency, lay a driver's license. The name emblazoned across the card caused a jolt that reverberated through him. Leo Javier Vargas. And the photograph? It was undeniably Serena, yet it was also undeniably not Serena. The same distinctive eyes stared back, but the hair was cropped short, the jawline perhaps a touch more angular, the clothing undeniably masculine. The image was of a younger man, rugged and defiant, bearing an unmistakable resemblance to the woman he was about to marry, but with a stark, undeniable difference. The shock was immediate, a cold plunge into an icy reality that threatened to suffocate him. His mind, trained to categorize and diagnose, struggled to reconcile the image of the man on the ID with the woman who lay sleeping peacefully in the next room. the woman he adored, the woman he had sworn to spend his life with. The passport, tucked beneath the license, confirmed his growing dread. It bore the same name, Leo Javier Vargas, and another photograph equally jarring. The birth date on both documents indicated that Leo was 3 years older than the age Serena had always claimed. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and seemingly disparate, suddenly began to click into place with terrifying precision. The elusive past, the missing family, the vague job descriptions, the convenient stories of lost documents, even the unexpected ferocity during the prenuptial agreement discussions. A wave of nausea washed over Elias. He felt a profound sense of violation, of a betrayal so deep it threatened to unravel the very fabric of his being. He was Elias Thorne, the pillar of his community, the guardian of womanhood, a man of truth and scientific fact. How could he have been so utterly, irrevocably deceived? He wanted to confront her immediately, to shake her awake and demand answers, but a primal fear held him back. The fear of what he might learn, the fear of the truth he suspected, the fear of losing the fragile happiness he had only just begun to taste. He spent the rest of the night in a torment of conflicting emotions, the ID clutched in his hand, its cold plastic a stark contrast to the raging inferno in his gut. The woman he loved was a phantom, a meticulously crafted illusion. The realization gnawed at him, eroding his trust, replacing his love with a corrosive blend of anger and humiliation. The planned honeymoon to the idyllic island of Isla Bonita, meant to be a celebration of their union, transformed into a tense, unspoken battleground. The turquoise waters and pristine beaches seemed to mock their strained silence. Elias watched Serena, every gesture, every smile, searching for clues, for an explanation that would make sense of the seismic shift in his understanding. He found none. She remained outwardly composed, charming and loving, seemingly oblivious to the abyss that had opened beneath their feet. He, however, was a ghost of his former self, consumed by the secret knowledge, unable to fully engage, unable to truly connect. Their conversations were strained, punctuated by long, uncomfortable silences. Each touch felt like a lie, each kiss a betrayal. He kept the ID hidden, a heavy secret pressing down on his chest, waiting for the opportune moment, or perhaps for a sign from fate itself. The sign came 2 days into their honeymoon, an unexpected twist of cruel irony that only a man of medicine would fully appreciate. Serena complained of excruciating abdominal pain, a sharp, twisting agony that doubled her over. Her face was pale, glistening with sweat. Elias, his professional instincts kicking in despite his personal turmoil, immediately went into doctor mode. The years of training, the countless emergencies he had handled, took over. He directed her to lie down, his voice calm, methodical. He needed to examine her, to rule out any serious medical emergency. As he began his examination, the cold reality of the situation began to set in, not as a theoretical concept, but as a visceral, undeniable truth. He was a gynecologist, intimately familiar with the female anatomy. As his hands moved over her abdomen, feeling for tenderness and distension, he felt them. Small, precise scars, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but glaringly obvious to his practiced touch. Scars that were inconsistent with any typical female abdominal surgery he had ever encountered. His fingers traced the delicate, almost imperceptible lines, and his mind raced through anatomical diagrams, through every possible surgical procedure. None of them fit. His examination continued, his initial professional concern now interwoven with a growing, horrifying certainty. He noticed subtle irregularities in her lower abdominal region, minute details that defied the typical female anatomical structure he had dedicated his life to studying. It wasn't just the scars. It was the entire landscape of her body, revealing nuances that were profoundly out of place for a biological woman. The blood drained from Elias's face. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suddenly heavy with unspoken truths. The woman lying before him, the woman he had married, was not who she claimed to be. The ID of Leo Javier Vargas, clutched in his carry-on just feet away, screamed its silent confirmation. He didn't need a medical degree to understand what he was seeing. He needed only his eyes and his years of specialized knowledge. Serena Vance, his beautiful, enigmatic bride, was not a biological woman. The truth, stark and brutal, lay exposed on the examination table. And with that revelation, Elias Thorne's world, already teetering on the brink, began its irreversible descent into chaos. The gavel's sharp crack may have signaled the end of the trial, but for Detective Valerie Hayes, the case of Elias Thorne and Serena Vance remained stubbornly, hauntingly open. The verdict of voluntary manslaughter, while legally satisfying, left too many unanswered questions, too many shadows clinging to Serena's past. Hayes, a woman driven by a deep-seated need for truth, felt an insistent pull to understand the woman at the heart of this tragedy, not just the victim of a sensational crime. She embarked on a personal quest, delving deeper into Serena's life, a journey that would reveal a story far more complex and heartbreaking than the public spectacle had allowed. Her investigation led her to San Pedro del Mar, the town Serena had vaguely referenced as her origin. Here, Hayes uncovered records confirming Serena's birth name, Leo Javier Vargas. The files painted a picture of a difficult upbringing marked by poverty and struggle. She traced Leo's early years, discovering a history of minor arrests for petty fraud and disorderly conduct, offenses often linked to survival in marginalized communities. The official records, however, provided only a skeletal framework. Hayes sought out the human story. Her search eventually led her to Mateo Vargas, a quiet, unassuming auto mechanic in a dusty garage in Sierra Vista. Mateo, a distant cousin and childhood friend of Leo, was initially hesitant, wary of revealing secrets to a stranger, especially a police officer. But Hayes's genuine empathy, her quiet persistence, eventually broke through his guarded exterior. Mateo spoke of Leo, a fiercely intelligent and artistic child who had always felt trapped in a body that didn't align with his spirit. He described Leo's early struggles with gender dysphoria, the relentless bullying, and the profound isolation that marked his adolescence. Mateo revealed that Leo, in his desperate attempt to find acceptance and a way to survive, had indeed drifted into a life of sex work, using his artistic talents to create digital art and virtual experiences for lonely souls online, blurring the lines between fantasy and reality. It was a life born of desperation, not depravity. He recounted the physical assault Leo suffered at the hands of a client, the brutal public outing on social media that followed, and the deep, enduring trauma it inflicted. He just wanted to be seen, truly seen, for who he was, Mateo explained, his voice thick with emotion, not for what people wanted him to be. He then revealed a profoundly moving detail, a small, worn box containing a collection of unsent letters. Among them was a letter addressed to Elias, written by Serena just weeks before their wedding. Mateo explained that Serena had intended to give it to Elias on their honeymoon, a final, terrifying leap of faith. In the letter, Serena poured out her heart, confessing her past, her fears, her journey. She spoke of the profound love she felt for Elias, a love that had made her dare to dream of a genuine, open life. She expressed her crippling fear of his rejection, of losing the one person who had made her feel truly cherished. It was a testament to her vulnerability, her agonizing internal conflict, and her desperate longing for acceptance. Meanwhile, back in Crescent City, Clara Thorne found herself grappling with her own complex emotions. The trial had been a public dismemberment of her family, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease. While she still loved her father, a part of her mourned the Serena she had never truly known. One rainy afternoon, while packing away some of her father's belongings, she discovered a small, ornate wooden box hidden beneath some old linens. It was Serena's, left behind in the chaotic aftermath of the arrest. Inside, among trinkets and faded photographs, lay another unsent letter, tucked carefully into a small velvet pouch. In Serena's letter to Clara, she expressed her profound admiration for Clara's strength and intelligence. She confessed her regret for the deception, acknowledging the pain she had caused, not just to Elias, but to Clara too. She spoke of her hopes for a new beginning with Elias, a life where she could finally be truly authentic, shedding the layers of her past. She revealed her deepest desire, to be a true partner to Elias and, perhaps, a stepmother to Clara. It was a poignant, heartbreaking glimpse into Serena's hopes for a future that would never come to pass. Clara wept as she read the letter, a profound sense of sorrow washing over her, realizing the depth of Serena's humanity and the weight of her secret. Months later, Clara made the difficult decision to visit her father in Blackwood Penitentiary. The sterile, unforgiving environment was a stark contrast to the opulent life Elias once led. Their conversation was initially strained, filled with unspoken accusations and lingering resentments. But as they spoke, Clara, clutching Serena's letter, pushed him gently to confront the truth, not just of Serena's identity, but of his own reactions. To her surprise, Elias, softened by the harsh realities of prison life and the passage of time, began to show a flicker of genuine introspection. He spoke of his initial rage, his feeling of humiliation, but also, surprisingly, of the genuine love he had felt for Serena. He admitted that his anger stemmed not from her being transgender, but from the perceived betrayal, the shattering of his deeply held beliefs about identity and truth. It was within the confines of Blackwood that Elias met Anya, a fellow inmate, a transgender woman serving a sentence for a non-violent offense. Anya, with a quiet strength and unwavering compassion, became an unlikely confidant for Elias. Through their conversations, she patiently guided him, challenging her prejudices, gently nudging him towards a deeper understanding of gender identity, of the courage it took to live authentically. Elias, stripped of his former status and forced to confront his own vulnerabilities, began a slow, arduous process of self-reflection. He started to see Serena not just as a betrayer, but as a complex human being, a victim of circumstance and societal intolerance, whose deepest desire was simply to be loved. He began to understand that his own reaction, his violence, was rooted in his rigid, conventional understanding of the world rather than Serena's inherent being. Outside the prison walls, the echoes of Serena's death continued to reverberate, fueling a vital national dialogue. Her story, tragically, became a catalyst, propelling conversations about transgender rights, the necessity of transparency in relationships, and the devastating consequences of prejudice and fear. In a profound gesture of healing and remembrance, a group of Elias's former patients, women who had once placed their trust in his skilled hands, came together. They were women who had been touched by the complexities of Elias's downfall and Serena's tragic end. They pooled their resources, their collective desire for reconciliation, and opened the Vance Women's Sanctuary in Crescent City. This new OB-GYN clinic, named in Serena's honor, specialized in trauma-informed care, offering free services to transgender women, sex workers, and victims of domestic violence. It was a space built on safety, understanding, and compassion, free of judgment, a living legacy to the woman whose death had sparked so much pain and ultimately so much necessary conversation. Years later, Clara Thorne, now a successful author and advocate, released her memoir, The Surgeon's Secret: A Daughter's Reckoning. The book, a raw and honest exploration of her family's tragedy, became a national bestseller, sparking further dialogue and earning critical acclaim. In its final pages, Clara reflected on her father's fate and Serena's legacy. She argued that Elias was not inherently evil, but rather a man destroyed by his own rigid perceptions, by his inability to reconcile the reality of love with the preconceived notions of identity. She wrote of how his world had been irrevocably shattered, not by Serena's truth, but by his own fear of a love that defied his narrow definitions. The final sentence of her memoir resonated deeply with readers. "My father, the surgeon who knew women and still killed one, was ultimately undone by the idea that his reality was not the only one." It was a testament to the enduring power of truth, the devastating cost of silence, and the fragile yet persistent hope for healing and understanding in a world still grappling with the complexities of human identity. The tranquil beauty of Isla Bonita was abruptly shattered by the chilling reality of death. The initial call to local authorities, a frantic and practiced lie from Elias Thorne, spoke of a tragic accident, a slip and fall in the shower. He described finding Serena Vance unresponsive, her head striking the hard tiles. His voice, though strained, carried the authoritative cadence of a medical professional, lending a deceptive air of credibility to his fabricated story. However, the seasoned eyes of Detective Valerie Hayes, who arrived at the scene with a quiet, observant demeanor, immediately registered the subtle dissonances. She had seen too many accidents that were anything but. The hotel suite, a scene of opulent romance mere hours before, was now a tableau of suspicion. Hayes noted the precise, almost too neat arrangement of items, a detail that screamed manipulation. A professional crime scene investigator knew that chaos, not order, often followed a true accident. She observed Elias, his grief seeming oddly controlled, his answers too rehearsed. His medical background, usually an asset, became a liability in her eyes. He knew precisely how to manage a scene, how to feign distress while concealing the truth. The slight tremor in his hands, which he attributed to shock, struck Hayes as something more akin to suppressed terror. The preliminary medical examination, conducted by local forensics, quickly contradicted Elias's narrative. The bruising around Serena's neck, though subtle, was indicative of manual strangulation, not a fall. The absence of significant head trauma, inconsistent with Elias's account, further solidified Hayes's suspicions. When the full autopsy report arrived days later, it unequivocally confirmed the cause of death as asphyxiation. The pathologist's findings were damning, painting a clear picture of violence. Armed with this damning evidence, Detective Hayes confronted Elias. The interview room in the small island police station was stark, a chilling contrast to the luxury of their honeymoon suite. Hayes's voice, calm and unyielding, laid out the evidence piece by piece, dismantling Elias's carefully constructed lie. She spoke of the neck bruising, the lack of a corresponding head injury, the inconsistencies in his timeline. Then she dropped the bomb that truly shattered his composure. "Dr. Thorne, we know about Leo Javier Vargas." The blood drained from Elias's face. The mention of that name, the name on the ID he had found, the name that represented the core of Serena's deception, hit him with the force of a physical blow. Hayes continued, her voice unwavering. "We also spoke to your daughter, Clara. She mentioned her concerns about Serena's past, about a man she overheard Serena arguing with. She also mentioned finding an ID. Tell me, doctor, why did you feel the need to hide Serena's true identity?" Cornered, exposed, and stripped of his last vestiges of control, Elias's stoic facade crumbled. He confessed, a torrent of words tumbling out. The discovery of the ID, the horrifying realization on the examination table, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, the uncontrolled rage that had culminated in Serena's death. He insisted, however, that his act was not driven by Serena's identity as a transgender woman, but by the profound deception she had perpetrated against him. The news of Serena Vance's murder and the subsequent arrest of the highly respected Dr. Elias Thorne exploded across the national headlines, turning a private tragedy into a public spectacle. The trial, held in a Bayou Vista courthouse, became a flashpoint for intense societal debates, far transcending the confines of a simple murder case. It ignited passionate arguments about gender identity, the boundaries of truth in relationships, and the fraught concept of self-defense against emotional deception. The media, hungry for sensationalism, sensationalized every detail, painting Elias as either a victim of elaborate fraud or a transphobic monster. Clara Thorne, Elias's daughter, found herself thrust into the unforgiving glare of the public spotlight. Her testimony was arguably the most pivotal and emotionally charged moment of the trial. With a trembling voice but unwavering conviction, she recounted her initial suspicions, her father's increasing distress, and his chilling confession to her following his arrest. She admitted to a complex mix of emotions, a lingering affection for her father, but also a profound sense of relief that Serena's deception had finally been exposed. She spoke of her father's transformation, how the man who had always been so rational and composed had become consumed by a raw, destructive anger she had never witnessed before. Her words, though painful, painted a picture of a man driven to an extreme by what he perceived as a fundamental betrayal rather than a premeditated killer. The defense, led by a shrewd and charismatic attorney, argued that Elias had experienced acute identity collapse, a psychological term coined for the trial, asserting that the sudden, shocking revelation of Serena's biological sex, combined with the years of elaborate deception, had triggered a profound break from reality. They painted a vivid picture of a man whose understanding of womanhood, the very essence of his profession and personal life, had been utterly and irrevocably shattered. They argued that his actions, though tragic, were a momentary loss of control, a desperate reaction to an unbearable psychological trauma, rather than a cold, calculated act of murder. Elias himself took the stand, his voice hoarse with a mixture of remorse and self-pity. He reiterated his claim. He did not kill Serena because she was transgender. He killed her because she had lied. His testimony, though seemingly earnest, was punctuated by an underlying tone of self-justification, a desperate attempt to salvage his shattered reputation and the remains of his identity. He described the emotional torment, the sense of utter degradation, the feeling of being stripped naked of his dignity and trust. The jury, a cross-section of society grappling with these complex issues, deliberated for days. The weight of public opinion, the nuances of gender identity, the legal definition of self-defense in the face of psychological harm, all swirled within the jury room. Finally, after hours of heated debate, they returned with their verdict: not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of voluntary manslaughter. It was a compromise verdict, reflecting the jury's acknowledgement of Elias's severe emotional distress, yet still holding him accountable for his violent act. He was subsequently sentenced to 18 years in Blackwood Penitentiary, a quiet, somber end to a public drama that had captivated and divided a nation. The halls of justice had rendered their decision, but the echoes of the tragedy and the questions it raised would linger for years to come. The vibrant hues that Serena Vance had painted onto Elias Thorne's once monochrome existence began to subtly, almost imperceptibly, bleed into shades of doubt. For Clara, Elias's daughter, these were not mere fleeting shadows, but stark, unignorable anomalies. Her intuition, sharper than any scalpel in her father's operating room, had pricked at her from their very first meeting. Serena, with her captivating charm and seemingly effortless grace, felt too polished, too perfectly constructed. Clara, a keen observer of human nature and a budding cybersecurity student, instinctively sensed a fundamental disharmony between Serena's radiant exterior and the elusive core she presented. The absence of any discernible family in Serena's life was the first significant discord. Serena spoke vaguely of a nomadic upbringing, of moving frequently due to her parents' work, but her narratives lacked the specific anecdotes, the endearing familial quirks that define a genuine history. Clara, accustomed to her father's open, if somewhat staid, recounting of his own past, found Serena's evasiveness unsettling. It wasn't just a lack of detail, it was an active deflection, a subtle redirection whenever the conversation veered too close to her origins. Clara would try to prod gently, asking about childhood memories or family traditions, only to be met with a charming smile and a swift pivot to a new topic, usually one centered on Elias and their burgeoning romance. Driven by a nascent unease, Clara began a subtle, almost clandestine, investigation into Serena's social media presence. Her skills, honed by hours spent delving into digital networks and tracing online footprints, were put to a new, unsettling test. What she found, or rather what she didn't find, only amplified her suspicions. Serena's online profile was meticulously curated, a glossy tableau of artistic endeavors and glamorous events, but it was conspicuously devoid of any genuine personal history. There were no old photos with childhood friends, no casual snapshots with family members, no digital breadcrumbs leading back to a tangible past. It was a digital ghost, a perfectly constructed facade designed to present an image rather than a life. The few tags or mentions from others were equally generic, devoid of any deep connection, as if Serena had expertly pruned her digital life to reveal only what she wished to be seen. The disquiet deepened one afternoon when Clara, arriving unexpectedly at her father's home, overheard a hushed, intense argument emanating from the living room. Serena's voice, usually a melodic whisper, was now sharp, edged with a raw frustration. An unknown male voice, equally strained, retorted in low, angry tones. Clara couldn't make out the specifics of the exchange, but the tension in the air was palpable, electric with an unspoken threat. The sudden silence that fell as she entered the room was even more telling, a clear indication that a private, volatile drama had been abruptly interrupted. Serena, though quickly regaining her composure, had a fleeting flicker of fear in her eyes that Clara did not miss. She quickly dismissed the man as a difficult client, a claim that felt thin, unconvincing. The concerns weren't confined to Clara alone. Sarah, Elias's trusted surgical nurse and confidant of many years, also harbored growing reservations. Sarah had known Elias through thick and thin, witnessing his quiet dignity and meticulous professionalism. She had seen the profound impact of his wife's death and the cautious hope that had bloomed with Serena's arrival. But she also saw the inconsistencies. Serena, despite claiming to be an event coordinator, seemed remarkably vague about the specifics of her work. When Sarah, in casual conversation, inquired about event venues or logistical challenges, Serena would offer non-committal answers, often changing the subject with a disarming charm. "Oh, it's all so fluid, darling," she'd purr. "You just have to adapt." It was a charming response, but it raised a red flag for Sarah, who was accustomed to the precise, detail-oriented world of medicine. Serena's stories about her artistic background were equally nebulous, filled with flowery descriptions but lacking in concrete examples or verifiable exhibitions. Elias himself, though deeply smitten, eventually began to feel the insistent prick of unease. Initially, he had dismissed Serena's evasiveness about her past as a charming eccentricity, a facet of her mysterious allure. He'd told himself it was simply a sign of her free-spirited nature, her focus on the present and future rather than dwelling on what was behind her. But as their relationship deepened, these charming quirks began to morph into unsettling patterns. Questions about her birth certificate, a seemingly innocuous detail, would be met with a story about a devastating house fire that had claimed all her original documents. Inquiries about past addresses or previous employment would be met with an anecdote about a catastrophic flood that had washed away all her records. Each explanation, while plausible on its own, became less so when stacked together, forming a flimsy narrative held together by convenient disasters. The ultimate catalyst for Elias's escalating discomfort, however, came during discussions surrounding their impending marriage. His financial advisor, a meticulous man of numbers, had strongly advised a prenuptial agreement, a standard procedure for individuals of Elias's substantial wealth. Elias, ever the pragmatist, presented the document to Serena, expecting a straightforward discussion, Instead, he was met with an unexpected, almost visceral intensity. Serena, while not outright refusing to sign, vehemently rejected the clause that prevented her from being named as a primary beneficiary on his significant life insurance policies. More alarmingly, she insisted on a substantial lump sum settlement in the event of a divorce, a demand that felt incongruous with the selfless, passionate woman he believed he had fallen in love with. "Darling," she had purred, her eyes wide and innocent, "it's just a formality, a safeguard. I would never want to be a burden." But her insistence, bordering on aggression, felt far from selfless. It was a jarring note in their carefully composed symphony, a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of romance lay a woman with clear financial demands. Elias, a man of science and logic, found himself grappling with a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. The woman he adored, the woman who had brought light back into his life, was also demanding a financial safety net that seemed to contradict the very essence of their passionate union. The whispers of doubt, initially faint, had now grown into a persistent clamor within his mind, signaling that the beautiful illusion he had embraced might be far more fragile and far more deceptive than he could ever have imagined. He was a man who relied on truth, on verifiable facts, and the increasing inconsistencies in Serena's story, coupled with her financial demands, began to chip away at the very foundation of his trust.